prayers, I will call on the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Parliament now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honour, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Premier, the Speaker of the Parliament, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of the Cabinet, ex officio members, members of the Parliament, the Chief Justice, and members of the Judiciary, that we may be enabled to faithfully perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May the Lord bless and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace, now and always. Amen.
Please be seated. This Honourable House is now in session. Proceedings are resumed.
Administration of oaths or affirmations.
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of messages and announcements.
None.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports. Sister Island Affordable Housing Development Corporation Annual Report for the year ended 31st of December 2020. To be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration and Lands.
The Honourable the Minister of District Administration and Lands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the report for the Sister Islands Affordable Housing Development Corporation, the annual report for the years ended 31st December 2020.
So ordered. Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak?
No, Mr. Speaker, the report is self-explanatory, only to say that it's the government's intention to continue with it and to ensure that houses are built during this 4-year term.
2020 Annual Report, Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture and Lands, Cayman Islands Government, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration and Lands.
The Honourable the Minister of District Administration and Lands.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the 2020 Annual Report for the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture, Lands, and the Cayman Islands, for the Cayman Islands Government.
Is the Minister speaking?
Mr. Speaker, in the interests of time, I'm going to forego the opportunity to speak. There will be things that will be coming up in Finance Committee. If needs be, I'll make a statement thereafter.
The 20th report of the Commission for Standards in Public Life for the period of 1st of August 2020 to the 31st of January 2021, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
The Honourable the Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I beg to lay on the table of this honorable Parliament the 20th report of the Commission for Standards in Public Life for the period of 1st of August 2020 to the 31st of January 2021.
So ordered. Is the Honorable Deputy Governor speaking?
Mr. Speaker, very briefly, just to thank all members of the Commission for their excellent work, in particular Ms. Rosa Miles, who has served with us for many, many years and has now retired from that post. She has done an absolutely amazing job for us. And also to remind all members of this House, including myself, that we have an obligation to file our declarations very soon. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Islands Human Rights Commission, promoting, protecting and preserving human rights. Report, 1st of January 2018 to the 31st of May 2019. Cayman Islands Human Rights Commission, report, briefing summary, 1st of June 2019 to the 31st of December 2019. Human Rights Commission, Cayman Islands Annual Report 2020, reporting period of 1st of January 2020 to the 31st of December 2020, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor.
The Honourable Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this honourable Parliament the Cayman Islands Human Rights Commission report promoting, protecting and preserving human rights, 1st of January 2018 to 31st of May 2019. Also the report covering 1st of June 2019 to the 31st of December 2019, and the reporting period 1st of January 2020 to the 31st of December 2020.
So ordered. Is the member speaking?
Mr. Speaker, just briefly, again to thank all of the members of the Human Rights Commission for their outstanding work, to welcome our new chairman, Mr. Dale Crowley, and thank him and his commission for the work that they have been doing to ensure that we observe human rights in the Cayman Islands.
(2020) Annual Report for Portfolio of Legal Affairs, Cayman Islands Government, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Attorney General.
The Honourable the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, seek leave of the Parliament to lay on the table the annual report for the portfolio of legal affairs for the relevant period. And, sorry. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah.
So ordered. Is the honourable member speaking?
Mr. Speaker, just to say the report itself is self-explanatory, have some extremely understandably useful and important information, and I would commend it to the honourable members of this House and the wider public, Mr. Speaker, and I also understandably wish to say thanks to the staff of the Portfolio of Legal Affairs, the Chief Officer and Solicitor General, Ms. Reshma Sharma, the attorneys, the professional staff, and all the other departments under the Portfolio of Legal Affairs, the Law School, the Legislative Drafting, Law Reform, the FRA, Anti-Money Laundering Unit, Law Revision Commission, Mr. Speaker, all very dedicated professionals and support staff, and I certainly would like to commend them for the tremendous work during the relevant period and continue. Thank you.
Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Cayman Islands, Annual Report 2020, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Attorney General.
The Honourable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I seek leave of Parliament to lay on the table the annual report for the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions for the period 2020, the year 2020.
So ordered. Is the Honorable Attorney General speaking?
Mr. Speaker, again, sorry, the report is self-explanatory, and I commend it to members of the public and honorable members of this Parliament, and also, Mr. Speaker, to express our gratitude to the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Acting Director and all the professional and support staff at that office for their valuable work. Thank you, sir.
Office of the Auditor General, Cayman Islands, Owen Roberts International Airport Terminal Redevelopment Project. Progress report as of August 2018, to be laid on the table by the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Honorable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the report of the Office of the Auditor General, Cayman Islands, Owen Roberts International Airport Terminal Redevelopment Project Progress Update as at August 2018, in January 2019.
So ordered. Is the Honorable Leader of the Opposition speaking?
No, thank you, sir. I think the report speaks to itself.
Office of the Auditor General, Cayman Islands, Financial Reporting of the Cayman Islands Government, General Report, 31st December 2019. Office of the Auditor General, Cayman Islands, Improving Financial Accountability and Transparency, Budgeting, December 2020. Report of the Standing Public Accounts Committee on the reports of the Office of the Auditor General on Owen Roberts International Airport Terminal Redevelopment Project, progress update as of August 2018, financial reporting of the Cayman Islands Government, General Report 2019, and improving financial accountability and transparency budgeting, to be laid on the table by the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Honorable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the following reports of the Auditor General, of the Office of the Auditor General, Cayman Islands, financial reporting of the Cayman Islands Government, General Report, 31st of December 2019, Office of the Auditor General, Cayman Islands, improving financial accountability and transparency, budgeting, December 2020, report of the Standing Public Accounts Committee on the reports of the Office of the Auditor General on Owen Roberts International Airport Terminal Redevelopment Project, progress update as at August 2018, financial reporting of the Cayman Islands Government, General Report 2019, and improving financial accountability and transparency, budgeting, December 2020.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Leader of the Opposition speaking?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Islands National Museum Annual Report 2016 to 2017. Cayman Islands National Museum Annual Report 2019, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage.
The Honourable Minister of Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the Annual Report 2016 to 2017 from the Cayman Islands National Museum.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Minister speaking there too?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table this Parliament the annual report for the National Museum from 2019.
So ordered. Is the member speaking? The Honourable Minister speaking?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Twenty 2016-2017 Annual Report for National Roads Authority for the 2016-2017 financial year. 2018 Annual Report for National Roads Authority for the 2018 financial year. 2019 Annual Report for the National Roads Authority for the 2019 financial year, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure.
The Honourable the Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to lay on this Honourable House the annual reports for the National Roads Authority for 2016, 17, 18 and 19 fiscal year.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking there too?
While I do not wish to speak specifically to the authority's annual report that are being tabled at this time, I do want to take the opportunity to thank the NRA management staff for their continued hard work and dedication to improving the road infrastructure and needs across the Cayman Islands. I am confident that the NRA and its new board members will continue to make progress in their vision to enhance the quality of the life, to promote the economic and prosperity and improve the access to mobility for all the residents and visitors of the Cayman Islands. I want to thank my colleagues in the Cabinet and the House of Parliament for their support as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
(2020) Annual Report, Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure, Cayman Islands Government, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure.
The Honourable the Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to lay on the Honourable House the annual report for the Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure for the 2020 fiscal year.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Minister speaking?
Again, while I do not wish to speak directly to it, for the Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure annual report that is being tabled at this time, I do want to take the opportunity to thank the Ministry of Finance, staff led by the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Carl Cooper, for their continued hard work and dedication in improving and ensuring that our ministry remains compliant by improving the transparency and accountability. I would also like to take this time to congratulate the team for achieving their unqualified audit opinion. The Ministry stands committed to continue with the timely submission of these reports, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Islands Development Bank Annual Report for the year ended December 31st, 2019, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the annual report of the Cayman Islands Development Bank, which is commonly referred to as CIDB, for the year ended 31st of December 2019.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Minister speaking?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Auditor General issued an unqualified opinion with an emphasis of matter on the financial statements of the CIDB for the 2019 financial year. The emphasis of matter, which does not change the unqualified opinion, is due to 1, the CIDB being significantly reliant on continuing government support from the proceeds of capital injections and services in order to meet its obligations and operational expenditure, and 2, 50% or 10.7 million of the overall loan portfolio of the CIDB being impaired. Mr. Speaker, the CIDB approved 88 loans during 2019 with a total value of $800,000. At the end of 2019, the CIDB's loan portfolio totaled $21.2 million, prior to a loan loss provision of $1.6 million. The decrease in debt was due primarily to the commencement of semi-annual principal payments on the $15.8 million loan facility with First Caribbean International Bank. Total liabilities equal $20.2 million at the end of the 2019 financial year. Mr. Speaker, CIDB attained a net surplus of $300,000 after earning $2.1 million in net income from operations and incurring $1.8 million in administrative expenses. CIDB therefore ended the 2019 financial year with $7.8 million in cash, which comprised of cash held in A, current and savings accounts, B, in fixed deposits, and C, on behalf of the Education Council Scholarship Fund. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Education Council Scholarship Fund, CIDB acts as an agent for the government and held $4.1 million in cash received from the government for scholarship services as outlined in the 2019 purchase agreement between CIDB and the Cayman Islands government. CIDB had no known contingent liabilities as of the 31st of December 2019. Mr. Speaker, the government wishes to express its gratitude to the staff of CIDB and its board of directors for their assistance and support during the period under review. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, Cayman Islands Government, Annual Report, 31st of December 2020, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the Parliament of this Honourable Parliament, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the annual report for the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development for its financial year ended 31st of December 2020.
So ordered. Is the Honourable the Minister speaking?
Briefly, Mr. Speaker. Although briefly may be relative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Auditor General issued an unqualified opinion on the financial statements of the Ministry for its financial year ended 31st of December 2020. An unqualified opinion signifies that the information contained in the financial statements is accurate and can be relied upon. As shown on pages 10 and 11 of the annual report, during the 12-month period ending 31st of December 2020, the Ministry comprised of 155 staff members, of which 137, or 88%, were Caymanian. 68% of the staff were female, and the majority of the staff was 41 years and older. Some of the Ministry's key events and achievements during the 2020 financial year included the preparation of the COVID-19 Cayman Islands Economic Assessment and Stimulus Plan, processing of 1,141 requests for the waiver of stamp duty and import duties at the value of $6.1 million, generating approximately $8.4 million in incremental revenues from operating investments, the arrangement of $330 million emergency line of credit, which is an insurance measure for the government to avoid having to deplete all of its cash reserve and to assist in meeting its financial obligations depending on how the COVID-19 pandemic recovery proceeds. Other achievements also include preparing the Ministry's 2021 to 2025 strategic plan, conducting workshops on procurement principles and ethics, as well as the Cayman Islands electronic procurement portal, Bonfire, delivering 97.6% letter mail on time, and arranging a government guaranteed loan scheme for medium and large-sized businesses, which is the loan scheme to assist medium and large-sized businesses in dealing with the financial hardships of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, the statement of executive financial transactions shows that, on behalf of the Cabinet, the Ministry collected $44.8 million in executive revenues, which was $15.6 million below budget. The primary reasons for the underachievement were due to: 1, cruise ship departure tax being under budget by 8.7 million due to the COVID-19 pandemic and borders being closed. 2, environmental protection fund fees being under budget by 4.4 million due to COVID-19 pandemic and borders being closed. 3, debit transaction fees being under budget $363,000 due to a decline in economic activity as a result of border closures, lockdown, and a decline in the population at that time. 4, other stamp duty being under budget by $165,000 due to a decrease in demand as the supplier of franking machines ceased their support in the Caribbean effective the 31st of December 2019. And 5, revenue from property insurance stamp duty exceeded budget expectation by $386,000 due to an active real estate market in 2020. On behalf of the Cabinet, the Ministry incurred $90.3 million in executive expenses, which was $11.8 million under the revised budget for executive expenses of $102.1 million. The statement of financial position shows that the Ministry ended the financial year with $19.2 million in total assets. Of this amount, Mr. Speaker, $9.9 million, or 51.6%, comprised of cash and cash equivalents, which includes cash on hand, cash in transit, and fixed deposit bank accounts, with a maturity of no more than 3 months from the date of placement. Total liabilities amounted to $2.1 million. Net assets, Mr. Speaker, which are the total assets less total liabilities, amounted to $17.1 million. Mr. Speaker, the statement of financial performance shows that the Ministry earned $14.6 million in operating revenues for the year. Almost all of this revenue was earned from the delivery of outputs to Cabinet. The Ministry incurred $14.6 million in operating expenses during the financial year, of which $11.8 million, or 80.8%, comprised of personnel costs. Personnel costs include salaries, health insurance, and pension costs. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry ended the 2020 financial year with a break-even result, since its actual surplus attained of $3,000 is essentially a break-even result. Mr. Speaker, this annual report shows that the Ministry has worked hard to provide effective, efficient, and outstanding public services which represent value for money and which contribute to the prosperity and productivity of the Cayman Islands. I also want to thank, Mr. Speaker, the staff and management of the Ministry for their hard work during the 2020 financial year, and I look forward for future successes in the year to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Islands Government Unaudited Quarterly Financial Report, 3 months period ended 31st of March 2021, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
Is it item 21 or 22? Did you just do the Cayman Islands on? You did the ministry, and you're doing item 21 at this point. Item 21. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the government, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the unaudited quarterly financial report for the core government of the Cayman Islands for the 3-month period ending 31st of March 2021, hereafter referred to as the period in accordance with Section 29(4) of the Public Management and Finance Act.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Minister speaking?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Again, briefly. Relative. Mr. Speaker, on the 11th of May 2021, the Minister of Finance and Economic Development arranged for the gazettal of the unaudited quarterly financial report for the core government of the Cayman Islands for the period. The gazettal of the report on the 11th of May 2021 is within the 6-week period after the end of the first quarter, 31st of March, that the Act requires. Mr. Speaker, the information referred hereto is based on records obtained from the General Ledger of the government's financial management system. It is also based on the representation and judgment provided by the Chief Financial Officers of ministries, portfolios, offices, and statutory authorities and government companies, SAGCs. Mr. Speaker, all of the amounts that I will provide from this point onwards are in Cayman Islands dollars. The Statement of Financial Position as at the 31st of March 2021 on page 7 of the document shows that the core government ended the period with $2.6 billion in total assets, $0.9 billion in total liabilities, and therefore with a $1.7 billion in net assets or net worth. Mr. Speaker, cash and cash equivalents, including fixed deposit with maturity durations not exceeding 90 days, were $79.5 million, and marketable securities, which comprise of fixed deposits with maturity durations exceeding 90 days, were $531.7 million, for a total of $611.2 million with respect to bank account balances. Due to the significant cash balances on hand, Mr. Speaker, the government continues to place funds on long-term fixed deposit. These long-term deposits are reflected as marketable securities on the Statement of Financial Position and are not included in the definition of cash and cash equivalents, which only represent deposits that are 90 days or less to maturity. Mr. Speaker, the public debt for the core government stood at $243.9 million at the 31st of March 2021. This was $35.4 million lower than the debt balance for the same period last year, for the previous year at the 31st of March 2020. Therefore, core government's debt has been reduced by $35 million over a 1-year period. Again, that's due to debt repayment. Mr. Speaker, the Statement of Financial Performance for the period shown at page 10 of the document indicates that core government earned total operating revenues of $404.2 million and incurred total operating expenses of $208 million. The resulting operating surplus for core government was $196.2 million. SAGCs contributed an additional $6.4 million to the operating surplus as a result of their favorable performance. The entire public sector produced an operating surplus of $202.6 million for the quarter, or 27% above budget. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that a significant portion of fees from the financial services sector are due within the first quarter of each financial year and are not expected to result in the receipt of significant revenues after the 31st of March. Mr. Speaker, revenue recorded for the first 3 months of 2021 was $39.6 million, above budget expectations. This positive variance was mainly concentrated in the category of coercive revenue, which are revenues received by government by virtue of the coercive powers of certain laws. Coercive revenues recorded for the period was $38.9 million more than budgeted expectation and $53.3 million higher than the prior year-to-date actual results, despite the significant decline in tourism-related revenues due to the extended closure of the borders. Mr. Speaker, coercive revenues items performing above budget expectations included private fund fees, which was a new revenue stream which contributed $44.8 million for the period, and stamp duty on land transfers of $9.2 million higher than budget for the period. But Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, there were some revenue items, coercive revenues items, that is, performing low budget expectations, and those are tourism accommodation tax, which was $14 million less than budget, other import duty, which was $3.7 million less than budget, cruise ship departure charges, which was $3 million below budget, and work permit fees, which was $2.7 million less than budget. Sales of goods and services of $9.9 million recorded for the period were $1.4 million better than budget. Mr. Speaker, expenses incurred for the period of 208 million were 12.1 million more than budgeted. Transfer payments during the period were 22.5 million greater than the level originally budgeted for the period back in 2019, but such a negative variance was partially offset by underspend in personnel costs and supplies and consumables. Mr. Speaker, the 22.5 million negative variance with respect to transfer payment is primarily due to the overages in sports and cultural tourism program assistant, 13.9 million negative variance, and support for business initiative, 4.7 million negative variance. These costs are in relation to financial assistance offered to displaced tourism workers and local business to help mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on their lives and their business operations. Costs relating to personnel for the period amounted to $90.5 million, which reflects an underspend in personnel costs of $2.9 million, or 3.1%, when compared to a budget of $93.4 million. This favorable variance is a result of several ministries and portfolios having vacant posts, which, the 31st of March 2021, remained unfilled. Personnel costs for the 2021 period were $3 million higher than the same 3-month period last year, due to revisions made to remuneration and salary regrading at the beginning of January 2021. Mr. Speaker, supplies and consumables of $22.1 million were also lower than projected, with an underspend of $10.3 million, or 31.9%. The most significant savings continue to be related to the purchases of service, which accounts for 55% of the overall variance. Ministries, portfolios, and offices anticipate that as the year progresses, costs will be aligned closer to initial budgeted projections. Mr. Speaker, the statement of cash flows on page 15 of the table document shows that the net cash inflows from operating activities total $196.2 million. The net cash outflows used by investing and financing activities total $259.7 million and $4.6 million, respectively. In closing, Mr. Speaker, the overall fiscal performance reported for the period shows an operating surplus of $202.6 million for the entire public sector, which is $43.1 million better than budget for the period. This result arises due to better performing fees from the financial services sector and land transfers. The government cash position ended at $611.2 million for the period, $172.1 million of which were held as reserve and restricted deposits, and $439.1 million as unrestricted operating bank account balances. The unaudited quarterly financial report for the core government of the Cayman Islands for the 3-month period ended 31st of March 2021 is available on the Gazette Office website, www.gazettes.gov.ky, and it was gazetted on the 11th of May 2021. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rest of these are, you can bundle them together now. Those are the ones you can bundle. Yeah, parliamentary pension and public service pension.
Public Service Pension Plan, report of the curial valuation for funding purposes as of the January 1st, 2020. Judicial Pension Plan, Parliamentary Pension Plan, report on the curial valuation for funding purposes as at January 1, 2020, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the government, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the 1st of January 2020 actual valuation reports for the Judicial Pension Plan, the Parliamentary Pension Plan, and the Public Service Pension Plan.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Minister speaking?
Briefly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me start by explaining the terms pension plan and pension fund. In the Cayman Islands public sector, the term pension plan refers to the rules that govern the operation of public sector pensions, such as eligibility to receive pensions, how pension payments are calculated, and the amount of contributions to be made to pensions by the public servants and their employers, the Cayman Islands government, along with statutory authorities and government-owned companies. The term pension fund, Mr. Speaker, refers to an arrangement that is established to receive pension contribution from employees and employers to invest those contributions to make pension payments to pensioners, to own assets, and to acknowledge its liabilities. In the Cayman Islands, there are 3 public sector pension plans and 3 public sector pension funds. Mr. Speaker, under Section 10 of the Judges' Emoluments and Allowances Order, 2005, Section 10 of the Parliamentary Pension Act, 2006 revision, and Section 12 of the Public Service Pension Act, 2017 revision, triennial actuarial evaluation of public sector pension funds are required in order to determine 1, the rate or rates of contribution required for the funds to meet their liabilities, and 2, whether funds are capable of meeting their long-term liabilities at the current rate or rates of contribution. Mr. Speaker, the actuarial reports reflect a combined CI 206.8 million deficiency with respect to the 3 public sector pension funds. The next triennial actuarial evaluations are to be carried out with an effective date of the 1st of January 2023. Mr. Speaker, I need to explain why the deficiency is not a cause for worry. With respect to the reports that have been tabled, the actuarial deficiency results from a comparison between the value of assets as of the 1st of January 2020 and the value assessed for liabilities that arise from future benefits due to public servants. The value of those future benefits is discounted back to the 1st of January 2020. Mr. Speaker, as of the 1st of January 2020, the 3 public sector pension plans had a combined total value of $858.4 million for assets and $1,065 million for liabilities. The difference between the total assets and the total liabilities equates to the $206.8 million actuarial deficiency, which I stated earlier. It is important to note that the government is permitted to address the actuarial deficiency over a 20-year period. The objective is to eliminate such a deficiency by the end of the 20-year period, which is the future, Mr. Speaker. This elimination of this deficiency will be achieved by 1, the government continuing to make payments to reduce the past service liability amount in the Appropriation Act for the 2020 and 2021 financial years, which is a summary of the detailed 2020 and 2021 budget. 15.1 million is included therein with respect to past service liability for 2020 and 15.1 million for 2021. The combined amount of 30.2 million that will be paid towards reducing the past service liability for 2020 and 2021 is in addition to monthly pension contributions that are based on percentages of public service salaries and wages. And 2, Mr. Speaker, the Public Service Pension Board is expected to continue earning robust returns on the investment of assets to the public sector pension funds. And 3, conducting a triennial actuarial evaluation to recommend the pension contribution rates required for the assets of the public sector pension funds in order to keep up with the value of benefits accruing to public servants. Mr. Speaker, a brief history of the public sector pension arrangement will also help to explain why a pension actuarial deficiency exists at present. Mr. Speaker, public sector pension arrangements were initiated in 1963. That's 10 years before I was born. From 1963, Mr. Speaker, the year pension arrangement originated to the establishment of the Public Service Pension Fund on the 1st of January 1990 is approximately 27 years. In essence, Mr. Speaker, when the Public Service Pension Fund was established on the 1st of January 1990, it inherited approximately 27 years of pension liabilities, but did not have any assets to meet those liabilities. Therefore, a deficiency existed on the first day of the fund's existence in 1990. This fund was established with effect from the 1st of January 1990, but no benefits could be paid out of the fund during the 1990s since it was not capable of meeting the projected liabilities after taking into account the contributions and earnings of the fund. Mr. Speaker, during the 1990s and prior years, pension payments were made directly from central government's general revenues. Mr. Speaker, since the year 2000, pension payments have been made from the public sector pension fund and not from central government's general revenues. This in itself is evidence that although there is an actuarial deficiency, the actuarial deficiency does not pose any immediate financial danger to the continued payment of pensions by public sector pension funds. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, the government discloses the value of the actuarial deficiency in its financial statement, demonstrating transparency with respect to the actuarial deficiency. In summary, Mr. Speaker, the existence of an actuarial deficiency is not a reason for immediate worry, because the government does have some time to eliminate this deficiency and is taking actions to do so. In the meantime, payments of monthly pensions continue to be made from public sector pension funds without any difficulty. Mr. Speaker, the 1st of January 2020 actuarial valuation report contained recommendations for pension contribution rates, and Cabinet has accepted those recommended rates, Mr. Speaker. With respect to the recommendation for the judicial pension plan, 1, a total of 30% of pensionable pay has been recommended for the defined contribution element of the plan, and 2, 0% or nothing is applicable as contribution rate for the defined pension part of the plan, because there aren't any participants anymore to this part of the plan. With respect to the recommendations for the parliamentary Sorry about that, Mr. Speaker. I forgot to silence my phone. With respect to the recommendation for the parliamentary, that wasn't my mother, though. Okay, I call her back. With respect to the recommendation of the parliamentary pension plan, Mr. Speaker, 1, the recommendation was 55.7% of the pensionable pay has been recommended for the defined benefit part of the plan, and 2, 12.4% of pensionable pay has been recommended for the defined contribution element of the plan. With respect to the recommendations of the public service pension plan, Mr. Speaker, 20.3% of pensionable pay has been recommended for the defined benefit part of the plan, and 12.4% of pensionable pay has been recommended for the defined contribution element of the plan. Mr. Speaker, for individual statutory authorities and government-owned companies, their contribution rates are specified in the 1st of January 2020 report under the section containing details for the public service pension plan at page 26 of that section. Mr. Speaker, in order to catch up with the increased pension contribution rates, as recommended in the 1st of January 2020 reports, the government will be making an additional payment of $3 million to the Public Service Pension Board in each of the 2020, 2021, and 2022 financial years. This additional payment, that totals $9 million, is the extra amount required for the government to make good or make whole the contribution to the past service liability figure for the 3 fiscal years that will end on the 31st of December 2022. The total extra payments of $9 million for the 3-year period is extra to the existing $15.1 million annually that is budgeted with respect to the past service liability payments. Mr. Speaker, it is important to explain that the pension actuarial valuation reports that have been tabled are funding valuations, meaning these reports recommend the amount of cash contribution that government should make in order to fund pension benefits. The 1st of January 2020 pension valuation funding reports differ from a pension accounting valuation reports, with the latter being used to determine the pension amounts that are reported in the government's financial statements in order to comply with international public sector accounting standards. Mr. Speaker, since the results from funding valuations and the accounting valuation of pensions differ, mainly because the need to use a different discount rate in the valuation, honorable members and the public should not compare the pension deficiency estimates provided in the funding valuation reports tabled today with the pension liability estimates contained in the government's forecast financial statements for 2020 to 2024. Mr. Speaker, to conclude, government will pass regulations to give legal effect to the pension contribution rates that are previously outlined, and those regulations have been drafted and will be taken to Cabinet shortly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Islands Stock Exchange report for the financial year ending 31st of December 2020, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Commerce.
Honourable the Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg that the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange report for the fiscal year ended 31 December 2020
So ordered.
be laid on the table of this Honorable House.
Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak?
Very briefly, Mr. Speaker, just to thank the board of the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange and the staff of the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange, which I should add is under the keen management of a former member of this Honorable House and former Minister for Finance, Marco Archer. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that the solid performance would be due in no small part to his economic stewardship.
National Conservation Council, promoting and securing biological diversity and sustainable use of natural resources in the Cayman Islands. Annual Report 2018, National Conservation Council, promoting and securing biological diversity and sustainable use of natural resources in the Cayman Islands. Annual Report 2019, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Premier, Minister of Sustainability and Climate Resilience.
The Honourable the Premier, Minister of Sustainability. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And good morning to everyone. Mr. Speaker, I rise to seek your permission to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the annual report for the National Conservation Council for 2018, and similarly the annual report for the National Conservation Council for the year 2019.
So ordered. Is the Premier speaking?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. We've had a redefinition this morning of what briefly means. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that we outline what the National Conservation Council has been doing in summary form, and I certainly commend the reading of the reports. But, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to focus on a number of areas, with your indulgence, sir. Mr. Speaker, the members may be aware that the National Conservation Council, which I will refer to as the Council or NCC from time to time, was established by and to facilitate the goals of the National Conservation Act 2013. That is to promote and secure biological diversity and the sustainable use of natural resources in the Cayman Islands, to protect and conserve endangered, threatened, and endemic wildlife and their habitats, to provide for protected terrestrial, wetland, and marine areas, and to give effect to the provisions of certain international conventions, including the protocol concerning specially protected areas and wildlife, to the Convention for the Protection and Development of the Marine Environment of the wider Caribbean region, also the Convention on Wetlands of International Importance, specifically relating to waterfowl habitat, the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, and the Global Convention on Biological Diversity and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I will start with the first report in terms of council activities for the period ended 31st December 2018. Over the course of 2018, Mr. Speaker, the council managed and oversaw the following: the issuance of over 200 permits or licenses for activities under the National Conservation Act, as well as over 450 pieces of advices to various entities concerning decisions or actions which may have had an adverse impact on native species and habitats. Public consultations, secondly, Mr. Speaker, on draft species conservation plan for mangroves, as well as publicly nominated protected areas. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the council endorsed feral cat control measures, and this was put on hold by a judicial review, and it is pending Department of Agriculture and Ministry of Agriculture actions to pass and implement prescribed poison regulations, which I believe has been actually completed. And there was also a requirement to appoint an animal welfare advisory committee. Next, Mr. Speaker, the council continued to await resolution on the questions of licenses for spear guns. And lastly, the council continued to seek cabinet direction on the proposed enhanced marine park system. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to provide some additional details regarding some of these important undertakings by the council in 2018. In terms of terrestrial protected areas, Mr. Speaker, public nominations of areas suitable for consideration as protected areas were received in 2018. These nominations were added to the list of areas proposed by the public in previous years and were assessed by the Department of Environment using the conservation scoring matrix agreed previously by the National Conservation Council. The council considered all nominations using the scoring system to inform their deliberations. A number of sites were selected by the council for full public consultation and negotiation with landowners, which included a mix of crown lands and private property. The results of this public consultation was to be considered by the council in 2019. Consultations in 2018, Mr. Speaker, with owners of land identified as being suitable for protection in 2017 and 2018 were complicated by the Cayman Islands government budget 2018 to 2019, not containing any funding from the Environmental Protection Fund that was earmarked for the acquisition of protected areas, as requested and as occurred in the 2016 to 17 budget. The total value of all of the contracted purchases and associated minor costs in 2017 was CI 4,879,850, which was expensed against the CI 6 million budgeted from the Environmental Protection Fund for this purpose. The conclusion of these negotiations in 2019 would depend upon supplemental funds being made available from the Environmental Protection Fund by the government. The Environmental Protection Fund is well resourced and was created to fund these ongoing purchases of land for conservation purposes. From 2016 through December 2018, the Cabinet, the Council, and the Department of Environment and other government agencies worked hard together to designate 3,477 acres of land on all three islands as public protected areas. Another 634 acres on Grand Cayman are designated as pending protected areas. In total, 4,111 acres, or 6.3% of Cayman's total landmass, has now been protected and reserved for the future use by residents and visitors to our islands. In terms of protected species, Mr. Speaker, a joint Department of Agriculture and Department of Environment cull of feral cats on Little Cayman was initiated with the support of the Council. Mr. Speaker, the cull was in relation to the protection of the Sister Islands rock iguana population, because the excess number of feral cats was having a significant impact on that population of rock iguanas. This joint departmental operation was based on evidence of the predation by these feral cats. In January of 2018, a judicial review of the cull resulted in the suspension of that project pending, one, passage of regulations governing the types of humane euthanasia chemicals that can be used during the cull, and two, a review of the program by the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. The Animals Prescribed Poisons Regulations 2018 were gazetted in August of that year. However, Mr. Speaker, the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee had not yet been appointed at the time of this 2018 report. Regarding another essential species, Mr. Speaker, a species conservation plan for mangroves was produced by the Council and underwent public consultation between 30th July to 3rd September 2018. The report on the consultation awaited a quorate Council meeting in order to review the report and decide on how to proceed with the proposed species conservation plan. Mr. Speaker, in relation to invasive species, and particularly green iguanas, in November 2018, a large-scale cull of green iguanas in Grand Cayman was initiated, building upon the knowledge gained during prior experimental culling exercises. By the end of 2018, over 294,000 invasive and destructive green iguanas had been culled. Also in 2018, Mr. Speaker, green iguana biosecurity and control activities continued on Little Cayman, largely through the National Trust Green Iguana Be-Gonna community program, supported by an on-island intern paid by the Department of Environment. Direct culling on Cayman Brac by Department of Environment organized teams also continued, and work on both sister islands would have to continue to prevent the green iguana population on Cayman Brac and Little Cayman from reaching the endemic proportions of the Grand Cayman population. In respect of Section 41 consultations, Mr. Speaker, as per Section 41 of the National Conservation Act, government agencies must consult with the National Conservation Council before granting a permit or a license or making some other decision that would be likely to have an adverse environmental impact. In 2018, 462 environmental reviews were prepared by the Department of Environment under delegated authority from the Council for entities consulting the Council under Section 41. Section 43 of the Act, Mr. Speaker, allows the Council, where necessary, to require the proponent to carry out an environmental impact assessment, or an EIA. EIAs are only required where the Council is unable to robustly identify and evaluate the potential impacts associated with a particular proposal. Of the 462 environmental reviews prepared by the Department of Environment, only one, or 0.2%, of the 462 reviews was determined to require an EIA. This proposal was a request by the new Ministry of Infrastructure for advice regarding a road extension, which was identical to a proposal that was submitted by the previous Ministry of Infrastructure and was screened in April 2017, when it was determined that an EIA was in fact required. The screening opinion was resent to the then new Ministry of Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, EIAs remain international best practice. A relatively minor cost of the projects that require them, especially compared to the potential savings they can identify for the project, and are an important tool for providing information to decision makers and assuring the public that environmentally, socially, and economically appropriate decision making is occurring. The activation of environmental impact assessments in local legislation has gone a long way to raising the profile of the Cayman Islands, which in February 2013 was assessed as weak in each of the 4 areas of environmental governance, species, sites, development control, and people, evaluated by the Foundation for International Environmental Law and Development. Having environmental impact assessment legislation, Mr. Speaker, also assists the Cayman Islands in achieving commitments made under the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Ramsar Convention, the Environmental Charter, and the Cayman Islands Constitution. A constitution, Mr. Speaker, that more than a few in this honourable House fought long and hard to secure for all Caymanians. Climate Change Committee. Mr. Speaker, throughout 2018, the Department of Environment and the chair of the Council's Climate Change Committee continued to advise government through the National Energy Policy Implementation Committee, as well as through direct communications with government ministers and MLAs, as they then were, particularly in advance of international or local forums where climate change would be a topic of discussion. The chair and the Department of Environment also participated directly in local and international meetings, and the Department of Environment continued to submit greenhouse gas inventory data for the Cayman Islands to the United Kingdom. In respect of council expenses, Mr. Speaker, for the year ended 31st December 2018, these totaled $8,362.02 and consisted of NCC-related meeting expenses, public education and outreach, as well as consultations and government fees for protected areas. In respect of the Environmental Protection Fund, Mr. Speaker, Section 3(9) of the Act provides that the Council shall manage and make recommendations on the use of the Environmental Protection Fund. Although Sections 46 and 47 of the Act, which provide in greater detail for the operation, management, and reporting on activities funded from the Environmental Protection Fund, were not implemented in this reporting period, and the fund continued to be operated under the pre-existing 1997 legislation. The Council makes the following report in completion of its duties under the Act. Mr. Speaker, in 2018, the following amounts were spent from the Environmental Protection Fund by the Department of Environment on behalf of or with the approval of the National Conservation Council. There was a total, Mr. Speaker, of $1,785,285.25, and that was divided amongst invasive green iguana control program, which was a majority at $1,664,219.53. The Grouper Moon project of $36,208.56. Reef restoration, $32,718.10. Turtle friendly lighting, $30,726.92. Sister Island rock iguanas, $12,878.75. The Parrot project of $5,684, and specialist legal advice of $2,849. In terms of the 2019 report, Mr. Speaker, during 2019, the Council identified irregular compliance with planning-related development controls as an increasing conservation concern. The issue of illegal clearing and other works prior to the receipt of planning permission had been raised previously by members of the public and covered in the local press. The Department of Environment, on behalf of the Council, investigated those reports and referred them on to the Planning Department and the Central Planning Authority for further action if applicable. It should be noted, Mr. Speaker, that the Department of Environment conservation officers have no authority to enforce legislation other than the National Conservation Act. These persons clearing land without the required planning permission mean that native vegetation and habitat can be lost before the Council has had an opportunity under Section 41 of the Act to advise the Central Planning Authority on possible measures which could be employed in order to preserve some of the native species and habitats while still allowing socially beneficial development to occur. Mr. Speaker, it has also become apparent that within the planning approval framework, some work is conducted through quote-unquote implied consent, whereby, for example, planning permission to subdivide property is assumed by the permittee to imply that permission has also been given to clear and fill the land as well, without the entity, in this case, the Department of Planning or Central Planning Authority, engaging in the legally required conservation consultation, which would be triggered by an application for permission to clear and fill the land. Another concern identified in 2019, Mr. Speaker, was the unpermitted construction of 30-foot roadways over private vehicular rights-of-way, where the existence of the right-of-way is assumed to imply permission to construct the road without further permits or review. The Council sought legal advice on this particular issue and have been advised that planning permission is in fact required to construct these roads. Council continued to work with the Department of Planning and the Solicitor General's Office during 2020 to resolve these issues. At the request of the former Minister of the Environment during 2019, the Council produced recommendations updating the regulation of spear guns in line with government policy as guided by the National Conservation Act. At the end of 2019, implementation of these regulations was still pending completion of the legal drafting process. Enhanced Marine Protected Areas System. Mr. Speaker, in March 2019, Cabinet granted approval for the National Conservation Council's Enhanced Marine Parks proposal, which would increase the marine protected areas in the Cayman Islands from current levels to 40 to 50% of the shelf area in the Cayman Islands. This approval included some amendments made by Cabinet in consultation with the Department of Environment. The approved proposal was then sent to be drafted in regulations by the Legislative Drafting Department or the Attorney General's Chambers. And once a legally formatted draft was completed, it would return to Cabinet for final approval. Mr. Speaker, in relation to terrestrial protected areas, as mentioned in my remarks, as mentioned in the NCC's annual report for 2018, and my remarks in respect to that, public nomination of areas suitable for consideration as protected areas were received in 2018. After technical assessment and public consultation, these nominated areas were considered by the Council in February 2019, along with other areas previously nominated, assessed, and publicly reviewed. In March 2019, the Council recommended to the Cabinet the acquisition and designation of properties on all 3 islands, a mixture of Crown lands and private parcels, which would have to be purchased at fair market value with the agreement of the landowners. We must all take note and recognize, Mr. Speaker, that this process of identification, negotiation, assessment, and agreement of market value for areas nominated for protection is not a process that involves solely the DOE and the Council, but rather involves many other individuals and agencies, including, Mr. Speaker, the landowners themselves, who are a critical and essential part, obviously, of the negotiating process. Before any of the nominated parcels were progressed, the landowners were contacted to confirm their interest in the possible sale of their property, subject to Cabinet's approval. Once the landowners confirmed their interest in selling, the Lands and Survey Department conducted the purchase negotiations on behalf of the Cayman Islands government and provisionally assessed the value of the lands proposed for purchase. In July 2019, Mr. Speaker, caucus reviewed the proposals generally favorably, but no further action had occurred pending refinement of the proposals by the Department and then Ministry of Environment. Given the passage of time, the Council would reinitiate these proposals in 2020. Obviously, that was implemented earlier this year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Council was active in 2019, carrying out its mandate in relation to protected species. The Council approved handling guidelines for stingrays and starfish in order to make it clear to the public what is allowed from what is not allowed when handling these Part 1 protected species. Mr. Speaker, the Council also managed the following in 2019. There was public consultation carried out on draft species conservation plan for Sybil's crown beard, which is a plant found only in Cayman brack. The registration of pet Cayman parrots was initiated. Members of the public proposed increased protection for local land crabs under Part 2 of the Act. The mangrove species conservation plan, which would provide additional protection for mangroves around the country from unpermitted or improper clearing or removal, was submitted to the Ministry of Environment for consideration of Cabinet. After public consultation, the Council considered and agreed to a proposal from a group of Caymanian hunters to alter the local game bird seasons to dates more in keeping with the natural cycles of the two game bird species, the blue-winged teal and white-winged doves. And lastly, after reviewing public and stakeholder input, the Council approved a draft species conservation plan for wild marine turtles, which was sent to Cabinet via the then Ministry of Environment. Mr. Speaker, the Council has issued an interim directive under Section 17(7) of the Act for the immediate protection of Agallinus kingsey, a plant that is endemic, meaning it belongs or is native only to the Cayman Islands. It is found only on Grand Cayman and is listed in Part 1 of Schedule 1 of the Act. This unique species is a habitat specialist which is with an extremely restricted distribution. It has currently been recorded in only 2 areas of Grand Cayman, which comprise the major population centers for this species globally. The interim directive shall cease to have effect on the adoption of conservation plan in respect of that plant, or at such earlier time as the Council or the Cabinet may direct. The Department of Environment remained in regular communication with the landowner on whose property the second population of the plant was found, and is working towards production of a conservation action acceptable to the landowner for the permanent conservation of this very rare endemic species. Mr. Speaker, as I outlined earlier, in November 2018, there was a large-scale cull of green iguanas, building up upon the knowledge gained during prior experimental culling exercises. That cull continued and remained successful through 2019, and by the end of 2019, they had surpassed the initial target of culling over 1 million invasive green iguanas. I believe this significant milestone deserves recognition, which it has no doubt achieved. Mr. Speaker, the project recorded the removal of over 1 million iguanas. I think it was 1,123,000 at that time, and that project was continuing into 2020. The Council also recognized the need for invasive species regulations and submitted a proposal to the then Ministry of Environment when submitting this request to the Ministry of in 2019. The Council indicated that those invasive species regulations were urgently needed in order to prevent persons from farming green iguanas for the bounty, provide tools to better protect and regulate the potential introduction of invasive species into the Cayman Islands, and to bolster the rules already in place under the National Conservation Act and the Animals and Plants Act. For Section 41 consultations, Mr. Speaker, in 2019, there was 546 environmental reviews. Obviously a significant increase from 2018. These were prepared by the Department of Environment under delegated authority from the Council for entities consulting the Council under Section 41. Of the 546 environmental reviews prepared by the Department of Environment in 2019, none were determined to require an environmental impact assessment. Mr. Speaker, in respect of the work around climate change throughout 2019, the Council, including members on the Department of Environment, continued to engage with local and international partners to both better understand the potential impacts and responses to climate change, as well as to promote the need for a robust national level local response to the reality of climate change for our small, low-lying country. In exercising its delegated authority from the Council, the Department of Environment, with input from the Council's Climate Change Committee, ensured that all of its Section 41 environmental reviews recommended measures to reduce physical vulnerability to climate change impacts and enhance resiliency in efficient ways that address the consequences of and responses to changing climatic conditions. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that in relation to this period, the DOE and the Council did a tremendous job, and we must recognize the important role the public plays in supporting the work that has been done. Mr. Speaker, it was 50 years ago when the legendary children's writer Dr. Seuss mentioned in his book, The Lorax, its whimsical yet powerful message regarding the importance of conserving our Earth's finite resources. The words of the Lorax still resonate today. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Much has been achieved, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure members will agree a lot was done during that period, and I wanted to take the time, Mr. Speaker, to address those two reports, even though they certainly relate to periods outside this government's time. But I want to congratulate the National Conservation Council for the really good work they've been doing, the Department of Environment as well, and thank the members of the National Conservation Council over that period for the excellent work which they carried out and their service to the country, sir. Thank you very much.
Honorable Premier, for my own knowledge, did you mention a rock iguana?
Yes, sir, the Sister Islands rock iguana.
Okay, so that's the difference between the green iguana and the blue iguana. Am I right?
Those are the three. We have one invasive species, which is the green iguana. We have two endemic species. We have the blue iguana, which is a Grand Cayman iguana. It's the only place in the world. And then we have the Sister Islands rock iguana, which exists on both Sister Islands, Little Cayman and Cayman Brac, sir.
Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome, sir.
I wasn't quite aware of the rock iguana. I know about the green one. He eating everything still. I will suspend proceedings for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Proceedings are resumed. Please be seated.
Auditors Oversight Authority, Cayman Islands, annual report for the year ended 31st of December 2020, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Commerce.
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this honorable House the Auditor's Oversight Authority, Cayman Islands annual report for the year ended 31 December 2020.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Minister speaking?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Islands Government 2020 Portfolio of the Civil Service Annual Report, April 2021, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor.
Honourable the Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the Portfolio of the Civil Service Annual Report 2020.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Deputy Governor speaking?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, 2020 was no ordinary year. While the civil service was faced with a huge challenge in the form of dealing with the COVID-19, that challenge provided numerous opportunities for civil servants to be nimble, innovative, and resilient. As the Cayman Islands prepared for the inevitable arrival of the disease, the government focus rightly pivoted to safeguarding the people of these islands from the deadly pandemic. Though the worsening global situation and rapid shifting of plans and priorities had the potential to thwart employee engagement and effectiveness, 2020 actually showcased some of the most rapid, inventive, and collaborative work ever delivered by the civil service. Teams across government had to quickly assemble when the National Emergency Operations Center, the NEOC, was activated in March, and from that point forward, had to establish protocols for managing all aspects of the country's COVID-19 response. The portfolio of the Civil Service, POCS, played an integral role in the response, from providing leadership in NEOC to lending expertise and resources to help facilitate the establishment of the award-winning emergency field hospital. POCS staff who ordinarily carried out administrative or HR tasks found themselves managing all aspects of government-run isolation facilities, while others spearheaded Operation Bring 'em Home, the repatriation program enacted to safely return Caymanians and residents to our shores. Other noteworthy POCS accomplishments were the swift deployment of a staff redeployment system used to match available staff across core government and statutory authorities and government-owned companies, with jobs experiencing increased demand, and the development and dissemination of 13 COVID-19 specific policies used to guide and direct key staff activities and decisions. In addition to these 13 policies, POCS delivered an additional 8 policies, including the all-important anti-bullying, harassment, and discrimination policy, which further supports our government structure and sets a very clear and important tone at the top. In spite of the unprecedented challenges faced by the civil service in 2020, our employee engagement survey yielded the highest response and engagement rates to date, achieving 83% and 72% respectively. Moreover, 89% of respondents reported that they are proud to be civil servants, which represents a 4% increase over 2019. As an individual entity, core POCS achieved praiseworthy double-digit increases in 8 out of 10 survey categories, with the top 3 increases being a 31% increase in leadership and managing change, a 30% increase in my team, and a 28% increase in my manager. These 3 increases resulted in overall scores of 79%, 84%, and 76% in the respective categories. These are truly remarkable results, Mr. Speaker, especially amidst the backdrop of local and global uncertainty that we as a government and country faced. Even though the pandemic diverted resources for a large part of the year, POCS departments and sections still got on with business as usual in many areas. Work in the area of compensation continued with the commencement of a review of our pay strategy and assessments of our readiness to recognize performance through pay and initiatives. The procurement process for our integrated enterprise-wide human resource management system, which will support the streamlining of processes and improve capability to support a modern HR function, was also completed, and the system is due to come online in 2021. Despite the disruptions caused by COVID-19, the Civil Service College was able to deliver 1,520 hours of tutor-led events and programs, representing an investment of over 18,544 hours in learning for civil servants. Additionally, 38,094 hours of online learning was logged by civil servants through the Civil Service College online learning portal, including for mandatory programs such as anti-fraud, cybersecurity, and anti-bullying, harassment, and discrimination training. On the 30th of October 2020, the Parliament Management Act was passed in the Parliament. This paved the way for the Parliament to become an autonomous entity and resulted in the historic renaming of the iconic building in central Georgetown. In my own office, my capable team led the development of a framework of enhancing child safeguarding policies and operations across the British Overseas Territories, working collaboratively with colleagues from across the territories and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. In addition to improved customer service experience, the British Overseas Territories Citizens and Naturalization Registration, a new online application process was launched. As 2020 proved, Mr. Speaker, we can do exceptional things on behalf of the government and the community that we serve. From exceptional moments in times of crisis to business as usual, the civil service consistently and completely delivered. If in 2021 we commit to building on the lessons learned in 2020, caring for each other, breaking down silos, increasing collaboration, and embracing innovation, we will undoubtedly continue to progress our collective vision of being a world-class civil service. Mr. Speaker, I wish to record my thanks to Chief Officer Macfield Nixon and her entire team in the portfolio of the Civil Service for their amazing performance during 2020, our CFO, Ms. Nadisha Walters, and her finance team for delivering another unqualified opinion, and the team in my office for all the work that they do to make people's lives better. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
(2020) Annual Report, Cayman Islands Expungement Board, Office of the Deputy Governor, Cayman Islands Government. to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor.
The Honourable the Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable Parliament the annual report for the Expungement Board for the 2020 calendar year.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Deputy Governor speaking?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by way of introduction, I shall first provide some background information and a brief explanation of the components of the 2020 annual report for the Expungement Board, and then speak to some summary highlights from these reports. Background. Mr. Speaker, the Criminal Records Spent Conviction Act 2018 revision repealed and replaced the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act 1998 revision and established the Expungement Board for the purpose of expunging criminal records. Mr. Speaker, it should be noted that the primary object of the Criminal Records Spent Conviction Act is to implement a scheme to limit the effects of a person's conviction for a range of offenses if the person, having served their sentence, subsequently completes a period of crime-free behavior. Mr. Speaker, the Act provides that on completion of that period, the conviction shall be regarded as spent, and subject to some exceptions, a person is eligible to apply for the expungement of that criminal record. By Act, applicants are limited to 2 expungements. Section 5.1 and Section 6.1 of the Act establishes an expungement board with authority to approve, disapprove, or revoke expungements. Mr. Speaker, by Act, criminal records for certain convictions and offenses can never be expunged, including, for example, treason, murder, child pornography, and child pornography. Schedule 2 and Section 12 of the Act provides the full list of offenses and convictions for which criminal records cannot be expunged. Mr. Speaker, where the criminal record of a person has been expunged, the Act establishes that the person will be treated for all purposes in Act as a person who has not committed the offense, been charged with the offense, been prosecuted for the offense, been convicted of the offense, been sentenced for the offense. Mr. Speaker, in Schedule 4, the Act specifically specifies certain professions and offices of employment where persons must disclose expunged criminal records. Mr. Speaker, Section 4 of the Criminal Records Spent Conviction Act states that the board shall submit to the governor a report for that year containing the number of applications for expungement of criminal records made in respect of the offenses referred to in Schedule 2 of the Act, the number of expungements of criminal records that the board approved or disapproved, categorized by the offense to which they relate, and, if applicable, the district of residence of the applicant, and any other information required by the governor. Mr. Speaker, in fulfillment of these requirements, the annual report just tabled contained information regarding the number of applications for expungement of criminal records received and disposed of by the Expungement Board in 2020. The annual report for the Expungement Board consists of the following sections: a chairman's report, tables of expungement statistics for the period, a discussion of the statistics, and some background information about the board and its members. Summary highlights of the report. Mr. Speaker, I will now share some summary highlights of the annual report of the Expungement Board. Mr. Speaker, since the annual report of the board, the number of applications, since the last annual report of the board, the number of applications submitted and the number of applications approved by the Expungement Board has decreased, and we believe that is in relation to the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, the Expungement Board annual report for 2019 indicates that 52 applicants were submitted to the board. Of these applications, 29 applications were deemed eligible and approved by the board. In contrast, Mr. Speaker, the annual report for 2020 indicates 23 applications were submitted to the board. Of these applicants, 21 were deemed eligible and approved by the board. Mr. Speaker, the 2020 annual report indicates that the most common reason for applications not being approved was that applicants did meet the eligibility requirements set out in the Act to be considered and were deemed ineligible by the board. Conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I believe the chairman of the Expungement Board, Ms. Marilyn Brandt, summarized well the importance of the work of the Expungement Board when she writes in her chairman's report for the 2020 annual report the following words. A benefit derived from the Criminal Record Spent Convictions Act 2020 revision is the elimination of discrimination against those who have been deemed to be rehabilitated. Expungement is an enormously valuable remedy because it ensures that individuals are not wrongfully denied opportunities because of mistakes made in the past. While it is accepted that expungement does not address all the challenges faced by those who have been criminally convicted, it is an essential mechanism because of the life-changing benefits that it can offer. Mr. Speaker, the members of the expungement boards are volunteers appointed by the governor. In addition to Ms. Brandt, the membership of the expungement board includes the following members of our community: Mr. Hugh Lockwood, Mrs. Kaylee Wright, and Pastor Allison Ebanks. My office, the Office of the Deputy Governor, provides secretarial support to the board, and a member of my team serves as a secretary to the board. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to express my appreciation for the small number of volunteers who make up the board. They are providing a very important service to our community. Another 21 expungements means that 21 citizens, Mr. Speaker, 21 citizens of our beloved islands now have an opportunity for a fresh start in life, having remained crime-free for the period required by the Act. Mr. Speaker, I would like to offer the chair and members of the expungement board the grateful thanks of our Cayman Islands community as we look forward to their continued service in support of second chances and new opportunities for our citizens. I would like to thank the staff in my office who provided secretarial services to the expungement board to support its effective functioning. This includes Administrative Manager, Ms. Judy Whitaker, my Chief Advisor, Ms. Mary Rodriguez, and Administrative Officer, Ms. Jordana McLaughlin. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
RCIPS Adult and Juvenile Caution Report, dated 13th of July 2021, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Attorney General.
The Honorable the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, seek the leave of the Parliament to lay on the table a report under the Caution Adult Law 2017 as it relates to number of cautions administered during the period 1st July 2020 to 23rd June 2021.
So ordered. Is the Attorney General speaking there at all?
Mr. Speaker, just to make some brief observation with your leave. First of all, I somewhat apologize for the format of the report. Mr. Speaker, we haven't quite yet worked out a format where we can probably do a bound document with the usual presentation, for presentation purposes. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, the document contains the relevant information for the period which shows that between the dates 1st July 2020 to 23rd June 2021, 43 adult cautions, Mr. Speaker, were administered. And, Mr. Speaker, there's some additional documents appended to the report for completeness, which covers the period during which the Act is in operation, Mr. Speaker. So for the entire duration of the Act, which is since 2017, some 135 cautions, Mr. Speaker, have been administered. And there's a breakdown in the report, sir, which shows the following. In respect of drug offenses, for 61 cautions, common assault, 15 cautions, theft, 13 cautions, use of an ICT service to defraud, 4 cautions, harassment, alarm, or distress, 3 cautions, for the offense of navigating a vessel to cause damage, 1 caution, disorderly conduct, 8 cautions, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, 12 cautions, Mr. Speaker, offense of damage to property, 11 cautions, cruelty to child, 2 cautions, threat to kill, 2 cautions, drunken disorderly, 1 caution, causing fear or provocation, 1 caution, failing to keep dog under proper control, 1 caution, and there was 1 pending. Mr. Speaker, the report also shows or details the fact that 76 of these cautions were administered by the RCIPS, Customs and Border Control / work, administered 9 of those cautions. The Office of Director of Public Prosecutions ruled that 35 cautions should be applied, and there were 14 cautions after charge, and this is where the charge were initially registered, but a decision was later taken by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions to proceed by way of caution, and of course the report also mentioned that there is 1 caution pending. Mr. Speaker, for completeness, it also speaks to, whilst this is not part of the reporting period under the adult caution law, it also quite helpfully sets out the amount of cautions that were administered to juveniles. And Mr. Speaker, that's a separate piece of legislative framework, but it shows that some 30 cautions have been administered to juveniles. Mr. Speaker, the significance of this is that the Honorable Deputy Governor just spoke about the opportunity, if you will, created or occasioned by the Expungement initiative. And some 21 citizens now have an opportunity for a fresh start in life, have been given a second chance. Mr. Speaker, in the same vein, these 130 odd cautions also afford persons, Mr. Speaker, who are involved here, an opportunity to continue living their life in a way that would otherwise have been the subject of a criminal conviction had they been prosecuted, Mr. Speaker. We recall that the language in the legislation provides that where a person behaves in a manner that amounts to an offense, and that person admits to so behaving, then that person may be cautioned instead of being charged or prosecuted with an offense. And so, Mr. Speaker, these are persons who have transgressed and they have admitted to their transgressions, and they have been given a caution instead of being charged and end up with a first-time conviction, and of course the attendant consequences of having a conviction record. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely good initiative, and it affords especially a lot of our young people a second opportunity to sort of reflect and continue living a crime-free life, and so as to avoid the unfortunate blemish, if I might call it that, of a conviction for some minor offenses. I commend the report, Mr. Speaker, to honorable members of this House, and indeed to the wider public, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Cayman Port Comprehensive Annual Report for the year ended December 31st, 2019, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Tourism and Transport.
The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Cayman Port Comprehensive Annual Report for the year ended December 31st, 2019.
So ordered. Is the minister speaking?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but very briefly. In its actual definition.
Yes.
In accordance with Section 52(8) of the Public Management and Finance Law 2020 revision, I am pleased today to place before this Honorable House the audited financial statements for the Port Authority of the Cayman Islands for the fiscal year of 2019. Mr. Speaker, the Port Authority of the Cayman Islands is a statutory body established on September the 15th, 1976, under the Port Authority law. The authority is principally engaged in the enforcement of the Port Authority law and the regulations, as well as the general management and control of all seaports within the Cayman Islands, as set out in the aforementioned law. Mr. Speaker, members of this Honorable House are aware that the authority currently operates 2 ports, one in Grand Cayman and one in Cayman Brac. The operations of the authority are regulated by the Cayman Islands, by the government of the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, the 2019 audited financial statements show that the total income for the year ended 31st of December 2019 was $26,569,405, while totaling operating expenditure was $19,590,477. The annual expense for the defined benefit liability, together with the depreciation and net gain associated with the reevaluation of investment property and the actuarials of the remeasurement of the defined benefit liability at December 31st, 2019, totaled $10,365,635. This resulted in a net loss of $3,386,707. The authority had the current assets of $15,335,968, a non-current assets of $69,655,448. Total assets amounts of $89,991,416 as of 31st of December 2019. The current liabilities were $2,104,556, and the non-current liabilities, which represents the authority's defined benefit health care liabilities and the lease liabilities, was $41,729,960 as of the 31st of December 2019. Total liabilities amounted to $43,834,525 for the same date. Total equity being contributed capital, retained earning and reevaluation reserves amounted to $41,156,891. Total liabilities and equity amounts to $84,991,416 for the year ended the 31st of December 2019. Mr. Speaker, the audited financial statements of the authority included the Auditor General's opinion. The financial statements have been audited by the Auditor General, and I'm delighted to report that an unqualified audit opinion has been issued on the 31st of December 2019 financials. The Auditor General states that the financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the Port Authority of the Cayman Islands as of the 31st of December 2019, and its financial performance and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with the International Financial Reporting Standards. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to thank the board and the management of the Port Authority, those included in Cayman Brac, for their hard work in producing these audited financial statements. I invite the members of this Honorable House and the public to review the report in detail. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions to honourable ministers and members of the cabinet. The elected member for Georgetown South. Oh yeah.
To the Premier for suspension of standing orders to allow business, to allow questions to be asked after the hour of 11 a.m.
As Mr. Speaker, I rise in accordance with Standing Order 86 to move a motion to suspend Standing Order 23, 7, and 8 to allow questions to be asked and answered after 11 a.m.
Question is the standing orders be suspended for questions to be asked after the hour of 11 a.m. All in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Standing orders are suspended. Questions?
The elected member for Georgetown South to ask the Honourable Minister of Education, District Administration and Lands. Question number 1.
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
You ask the question first.
Sorry. The elected member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 1 on the order paper standing in my name. Question: can the Honourable Minister state how the Ministry of Education will be supporting schools to ensure that they monitor and enhance the use of technology to support great teaching in real-world classroom situations?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The answer: a plethora of software to support the curriculum is available for teachers and students' use in instructional provision. Key performance indicators, KPIs, established by the Ministry and Department of Education Services will be analyzed monthly, which will monitor the utilization for teaching and learning of the said devices provided by the students and teachers. This analysis will form the basis of discussion with school leaders. ICT administrators are assigned to each government school to provide technical support during the school day, and a help desk system will be in place to provide support after school hours for the 2021-2022 school year. Software has been purchased to support enhanced cybersecurity, in addition to security measures currently in place to prevent any misuse by accessing unauthorized sites. Anti-theft software is installed on each device, which will ensure the successful recovery of devices in case of theft.
The member for Georgetown South, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I have a supplementary. Can the minister state how she proposed to bridge the digital divide between students and ensure that all students have the same access to online learning resources?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the devices are being used to access relevant resources to support teaching and learning, including software and websites. They're also being used to research information and produce work across all subject areas and year levels. The digital software that we're utilizing are GradeMaker, Get Set for PE, Phonics Online, and Twink. The agreed KPIs will be captured in Power B1, a statistical tool that collates information for analysis and access and analyzed by the SSIOs, Based on their analysis, further discussions with school will ensure regarding relevant strategies to improve engagement, increase technology integration, improve teacher and student competencies in technological use, and any other areas of deficiency that have been identified with analysis. 2 ICTI staff have been assigned to John Gray High School, 2 to Clifton Hunter, 1 to Lehman Scott and Little Cayman Education Services, 1 to SciFAC, and 5 rotating across all primary schools. There's currently an online help desk platform that is manned during the school hours by the assigned ICT staff in the ministry. Currently, discussion is taking place to provide help desk support after school from 4 to 10. There's also software that has been purchased to support enhanced cybersecurity, DNS content filtering, and next generation input protection, remote monitoring and management platform for anti-theft software. And Mr. Speaker, once we have been advised that a device have been stolen, a police report will have to be made. Once we have a case number, we can then request the anti-theft service to track the device and alert the relevant authorities as necessary. And we're also able to remotely disable the device. Mr. Speaker, you will notice that I gave supplementary information that I thought was necessary, and the specific response to the supplementary is the format of another substantial question, number 2, which I'll answer at that time.
The elected member for Georgetown South to ask the Honourable Minister of Education, District Administration and Lands. Question number 2.
Elected member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question number 2 on the order paper standing in my name. Question: can the Honourable Minister provide an update on the Ministry of Education's overall digital strategy to facilitate distance learning for students, and can the Honourable Minister commit to a timeline for its implementation?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the Honourable Member. The answer: distant learning is implemented in instances where there is a disruption to the person's educational instruction. This may be due to natural disasters, hurricanes or earthquake, pandemics or other emergencies, example fire or flooding, or personal circumstances of staff or students which make in-person instruction impossible, for example, illness or quarantine. The Ministry of Education's digital strategy is multifaceted and includes the following, Mr. Speaker: policy, strategy, and guidance documents, the distance learning policy, ICT, and computing strategy, as well as the acceptable use policy, have all been drafted and are going through consultation with the various stakeholders. Further guidance will be provided to parents through a document titled Device for Students Guide, which will be reviewed for approval by July 30th, 2021. All documents are expected to be finalized and fully implemented in the upcoming school year. Many areas of good practice have already been implemented throughout the current school year. However, Mr. Speaker, the policy and strategy documents combine these practices into cohesive guidance for use in our schools. Resources: computing devices, including laptops and iPads for students, have been imaged and distributed throughout government schools for the one-to-one student laptop initiative that I have introduced. This will ensure that every student has access to digital service and that these are utilized for learning at school and at home. Laptops for teachers have also been provided. There's a smart technology in classrooms, and there has been network infrastructure upgrades in every single government school. Internet provision. All schools have internet provision, and the Ministry of Education and Department of Education have been working diligently with internet providers to find ways to get internet access to all of our students at home. Having the computing device, Mr. Speaker, is but one critical step. However, we need private sector industry partnership to have internet access available to our students at home. ICT integration. Our schools have been working with the ministry and indeed the Department of Education personnel on the integration of ICT in a range of subject areas. Technology is fluid, and students and teachers are utilizing technology for learning in various lessons. This is critical, Mr. Speaker, for our students as they apply these skills to continue working when they are at home. Discrete ICT and computing skills. There's a need to upskill students in the use of the various computing devices, hardware and software. Discrete ICT and computing skills are taught at the primary and secondary levels to help our students successfully navigate the technology for learning. Many students are apt at using a smartphone, but still require support when utilizing a laptop or iPad. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, we have seen an increase in the uptake of ICT subject areas at the secondary school level. Professional development for our educators. Just as additional support was provided to our students to support their successful use of technology, the same was also carried out for our educators. Professional development has been provided to our staff individually as well as systemic to enhance skills and to gain proficiency with a range of the devices, hardware, and software. The integration of technology, Mr. Speaker, was a broad outcome for the Cayman Islands government in the 2020 Strategic Policy Statement and provided continued focus by the Ministry of Education in the integration of technology in government schools. The recent COVID-19 pandemic indeed highlighted the extent of the digital divide in the Cayman Islands and indeed worldwide, which coincided with the work being undertaken by the Ministry and Department of Education Services to advance this important area.
Supplementaries. The member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I have a few supplementary. Can the minister state how she will judge the success of the plans she has outlined? Will she commit to regular reporting of progress towards the goals she has set?
Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government is indeed more than happy to be reporting the legitimate anticipation of the success that we hope to achieve for our students and teachers alike in our public schools and by extension our private schools. We hope to monitor that just as it has been done traditionally through our SSIOS. And indeed, as I've always said, Mr. Speaker, education has to be a tri-partnership. It has to be the ministry, the school, and the parents and the community on the whole. And by that, I would merely say that because, like Mandela, if we think that education is expensive, as has been expressed in some quarters, try ignorance. And because we're not in the business of trying ignorance, I would ask that all hands be on deck to ensure that as we nation build and move towards a first-class education in a first-class jurisdiction, that the monitoring is not specified to the minister alone, but everybody monitors enhanced, not just from a critical perspective, but from a position of interest to propel our students in a positive upward trajectory.
Member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister state how much has been allocated or will be allocated in future budgets to ensure the successful implementation of the plans the minister has outlined? Will levels of investment be maintained so that technology and digital resources can be kept up to date given the rapid pace of change?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the honourable member. Mr. Speaker, based on the rules of anticipation, I am not in a position to say what future budgets will do, but what I can say that based on the SPS that was presented yesterday, it's a good indication that an increased amount has been dedicated to education, and I have a legitimate expectation because education apparently now is on the front burner of all and sundry in the House and out of the House, that there will not be a no vote when it comes to an ask for education appropriations in the future.
The member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister work in partnership with local Caymanian technology companies to ensure that the use of technology by students best prepares them for future work?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister, as an individual, will not work as a silo, but by extension through the Section 5 provisions of the Constitution, those responsible for administration will certainly work from the operational level, and in fact, I've already started to work with Flow and with Digicel. We've actually hired on board Mr. Lance Barnes, who's now in charge of ICT, but the Minister will work with the government and all those who are interested to contribute in a positive fashion to create the policies to ensure that education does not become a political football, but that education becomes the golden star on whatever government that is put in place agenda.
The elected member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my last supplementary. The Minister will be aware of the advantages that technology brings in terms of opportunities for creative learning. However, concerns have been expressed in the United States, including by the New York Times, that a reliance on technology is crowding out tuition in basic skills like language. What steps is the Minister taking to ensure that in Cayman we maximize the benefits of technology but still maintain our focus on basic skills?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry is not in a deficit cognizance as it relates to the utilization of technology. In fact, Mr. Speaker, when we embarked on the British curriculum, it was for that reason, where there is a consummation of the traditional way of learning, but that it is not left behind. And as a result, we have injected the utilization of technology within our schools, hence the reason of moving to the one-to-one laptop and giving them to our students so that they could take them at home, and that invoked an unusual amount of expression of confidence in our students, but we have to start somewhere, Mr. Speaker. And so our teachers have been trained, because education is a continuum, it's a journey. There will continue to be teacher training days as well as student training days where they will understand that we cannot leave the traditional English and math. And you will see when you take a closer scrutiny of our curriculum that those core subjects of English and math and science and IT have been even in place in the front part of the day to ensure that we get the students when they're fresh at home. And now that we're introducing, the breakfast and the lunch, that we are giving them every single opportunity to be first-class students. We've also, Mr. Speaker, ensured that the teachers take time to decorate their classrooms, not just with something that is ordered on Amazon, but with the actual work from the children. And of course, that's not just printed outputs from the computer, that's handwriting, that's the SIM subjects, that's photographs, rewarding students who have done well. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that all bodes well for the future of education. It's not a utopia. As soon as we think that we've reached excellent, we'll see that the parameters have changed. But what I certainly, as Minister and as part of this Honourable House, wish to leave the stage of education is that we have made every single effort to invest into the resources, both HR as well as the capital acquisition, so that no child will be left behind. So, Mr. Speaker, because we are approaching it from a holistic perspective, we have taken into consideration that all things Caymanian include good handwriting. The difference is that they will be able to leave Cayman, go to Hong Kong, New York, or London, and they won't have to wonder what a computer is.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister identified an issue there in her response, that there is an issue with getting internet access into all of our homes, the homes of our students. I wonder if the Minister can give us some indication as to how big the issue is in terms of possible numbers of homes that are without it, and what are some of the things that they're considering as ways in which to be able to get this technology and get internet access to our homes.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, just to give by way of background, we have replaced all network switches. We replaced all wireless access points. We have increased the bandwidth in all of our schools to 300 megabytes to provide faster internet speed, and as a result, greater accessibility for our teachers and students. Currently, we have not had any additional requests for internet access support from our students. While we cannot say definitively that all students have internet access, no current requests are in DES, and indeed, if they come in, we give the commitment to do as we have done with those that hitherto before come in, provide the requisite internet access. If students are in need, however, of internet access, and by way of listening to this forum or by the representatives that are here, there's a procedure in place where the request should go to the school's principal, who would pass that request on to the business services and the STEM specialist. DES, or Department of Educational Services, has procured 145 LTE modems and 170 internet subscriptions. And these devices and services remain available to assist the students in need. And finally, I would just wish to add that the STEM specialist and the head of professional development have been working with a program which includes a teacher technology competencies survey, and that's important so that we can show the level of utilization both by our students and by our teachers, and we would hope that that continues in the upward trajectory. I can say that I recently visited the schools, Mr. Speaker, and I was absolutely delighted, in particular when I visited the District of Easton, to see the year 4 and 5 students with their laptops all on their desks, with the teacher using a smart board with now higher speed internet, that they were not having to be delayed in their studies, and they were also excited to have that in the classroom. And I can say that the Ministry and DS have been in talks with Flow and Digicel with this network, and if there are any other ICT partners out there, if you want to positively contribute to the community in Cayman as we strive together to nation build, and like Obama, I believe that yes, we can, and together we get more, I would ask them to contact the Department of Educational Services so that we can have a very productive service to our students. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that Cayman has been good, having had a background working for Flow many years ago as a young student, that it's time that these ICT providers can contribute back to the Cayman Islands, and I'm sure that they will, as they have been attempting to do, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Transport.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I am actually rising at a point of clarity and from a procedural matter. I saw that my good colleague from Georgetown South asked a question recently that, to my understanding, is contrary to the standing orders, section 22(1)(b), in respect to asking questions that is related to newspaper articles. I just ask that the member be mindful as to the standing orders and the scope of questioning and how the questions are asked.
The House will understand that when any member asks or does anything here, and I have a capable minister coming behind, the Speaker will remain silent so that that minister can show the world that she's knowledgeable or he's knowledgeable. You are right. They should provide a copy, first of all, to the Speaker if they're going to talk about an article. Are you questioning a matter member for Georgetown North?
The elected member for Georgetown North to ask Honourable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. Question number 3.
The elected member for Georgetown North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 3, standing in my name, to the Honourable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. The question is, can the Honourable Minister provide an update on the Dorsey Drive upgrades?
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure.
The answer, Mr. Speaker, I am reliably informed that the Water Authority has nearly finished its pipeline replacement along Dorsey Drive between Portland Road intersection and the brand source store. Once completed, Mr. Speaker, the NRA expects to carry out its full pavement rehabilitation of Dorsey Drive, north-south intersection, to Dorsey Drive and Warren Roberts Drive roundabout within the next 3 to 4 weeks.
The member for Georgetown North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Honourable Minister for the answer and look forward to it, I think, as many people are. Would the Honourable Minister know whether or not there will be any upgrades to the drainage system in that area, as Dorsey Drive has been known, or historically, a very low-lying area?
The answer, Mr. Speaker, is yes, there will be some upgrades to the drainage in that area, sir.
Thank you, Minister.
The elected member for Georgetown North to ask Honourable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. Question number 4.
The Honourable the elected member for Georgetown North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 4, standing in my name, to the Honourable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. The question is, can the Honourable Minister provide an update on the Godfrey Nixon Way extension?
The Honourable the Minister of Planning and Infrastructure.
The answer, Mr. Speaker, I've been reliably informed that the NRA installed a base fill between North Church Street and Diaz Lane and carried out some works exclusive to the base fill and drains on the large tract of land owned by Crown. However, Mr. Speaker, there are 7 parcels of land along the planned route for which land claims have not yet been settled. The NRA is unable to commence further construction until vacant positions can be obtained from the route entirely.
The elected member for Georgetown North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank the Honourable Minister for the response, and I also would like to acknowledge and thank the Honourable Minister for meeting with me and having a look at the project and identifying, and I pointed out to him a few of the properties that require some special attention, and I remain committed to assisting the Minister should he need any assistance in that area.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank the Honourable member from Georgetown North for that, and I look forward to working with him on that future road, sir.
Statements by honourable ministers and members of the cabinet.
None. No statements. Nobody gave me any. No statements.
Personal explanations.
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raised a matter of privileges.
None.
Government business.
We will take the luncheon break at this point. We will resume at 2:30. The House will resume at 2:30.